Marla Blow is the president and COO of the Skoll Foundation, which is an organization that catalyzes social change by investing and championing social entrepreneurs. Marla manages all programs in this $2 billion endowment fund. Marla is long tenured in consumer finance with experience as an executive, a federal regulator, an entrepreneur, an angel investor, and public and private board service. She's done it all. Marla holds an MBA from Stanford University, received her BS in economics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Marla, welcome.
Thank you.
Ever since I heard you back in DC where you talked about your life and your challenges, I have been so inspired, and I hope everyone listening today are equally inspired. It's really an honor to talk to you today.
Thank you.
My first, question to you. Everyone's afraid of failure, but success comes from not being afraid to fail. In your life experiences, how have you overcome this fear and accomplished all the amazing things that you have? So could you talk to us about your journey, some of these experiences, and how you overcame this fear?
Absolutely. So thank you, Pratibha, and it is a wonderful opportunity to be here. So happy to talk with this audience. And I guess I'd start by saying, right, failure is very much part of the journey. And anyone that you have read about or that you are observing or seeing in some kind of leadership capacity, or who has built something or who has achieved something that you think is significant, in all likelihood, I almost say 100%, Pratibha. Maybe I'm going a little too far, but very close to 100% of them have had, I would say, moderate to even severe failure along the path, right? It is part and parcel. It is the learning experience. It's where the growth happens. I can point to sort of any number of failures across the journey that I've been on. Probably one of the biggest is, as an entrepreneur, I started a company called FS Card. I started it in 2014, and focus there was building opportunity for credit and access to productive credit for underserved consumers, and really looking at what they were using as alternative kinds of credit products, right? Payday loans, pawn shops, right? Auto title loans, which are really, really hard to manage. So this is something that I knew a lot about, right? I've been in consumer finance, as you mentioned, for, at that point, probably over a decade, including time as a federal regulator. I had been an executive in large corporate in the consumer finance space. But I saw an opportunity to bring this product to market, and we're out. We have to raise the capital in order to be able to do it. I am starting this organization, so this is all on me to get this to happen. And talked with every investor under the sun you can imagine. I probably pitched FS Card 100, 150, maybe even 200 times. And by the way, right, it's International Women's Day, so I'll add, during the course of pitching FS Card, I probably pitched to women 3 times, right, where there was a woman across the table in these conversations. So maybe come back to the conversation about the presence of women in making investment decisions and capital allocation. But at no point did I really, in any significant way, get an opportunity to talk to other women about this possibility. I was really, really stuck on raising this capital. Finally got a term sheet from a large private equity firm, which I will not name to protect the identity of the guilty, but they know who they are. I started feeling, after they sent us the term sheet, they started to feel these weird vibes about kind of what was happening. And talked to my board chair about it, and he said, you know what, you're just tired and paranoid, but we've got a term sheet. We're going to go push this thing through and let's get a deal done, and let's get started with getting this product out into the market. And then everybody went radio silent. I didn't hear from my board chair. I didn't hear from this private equity firm. Everybody just disappeared. And so finally, after a couple of days of this silence, I reached out again and I said, what is going on? Something is happening. And it turns out that this private equity firm got in touch with my board and said, you know what? We really like this idea. We really like this work, but we don't want Marla to be the lead. We think Marla's smart. She's interesting, could bring a lot of value to this, but she can't be CEO. So we want to proceed with the investment that we have in mind, but we want to go out and find a new CEO while we go and do it. Let's join hands between my board and this outside investor. They're going to go out and find somebody to take my role, right, and take my job in this undertaking. So rather than my board saying, like, you know what, this is Marla's brainchild, they actually said, okay, you know what, let's go out and scour the universe and find somebody else to take this on and take my seat. Needless to say, right, Pratibha's not a surprise. No one wanted to step into a non-existent existent business that they didn't start, right? I wanted to do it because it was my baby. And so after they finally kind of realized, you know what, we're not going to find the kind of person we want to step in and take this private equity firm withdrew their term sheet, and they sort of said, you know what, we got other things that we're going to go and do. We're sorry, but we're out. And so they disappeared. I'm left with my board to pick up the pieces. We don't have any more money to try to keep going with what we were doing. I ended up having to lay off the few people that I had actually managed to hire and try to go back out and start again and raise the money to try to get this off the ground. I don't want to take too much more time on this, but I guess it's important to know, right? This was devastating, right? This was a devastating kind of painful damage to my relationship with my board chair, with the undermining of me before I'd even had a chance to demonstrate what I was capable of doing. And still, I've gotten all these people signed up to participate with us in building this business. I do still have a few employees. I've got to figure out how to regroup and get back in the game. So, I got back up, picked myself up off the mat, went back out and continued pitching, ended up running into one of my former colleagues from 20 years prior at that point, who had been now sort of moving into a large private credit hedge fund, and went and pitched to some of his colleagues in another part of his organization, raised $10 million from them, brought them on board including replacing my board, and got the product launched within 3 months of them writing us that term sheet and actually getting that deal done. And by the way, I actually managed to rehire a couple people that I had to lay off and bring them back, and we got the product off the ground.
Wow.
So I think,
Marla.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. For me, it's really just about finding it in myself to get back up and recover from that and keep going, right? Through incredible sort of setbacks and huge loss and sort of fundamental kind of disregard for me in a way that really felt personal. I've since learned that, there's all kinds of behavior in the capital markets and nothing would surprise me at this point, but I didn't know that at the time. And I had to work through that as well. And then, for those of you that don't know where this story leads, we ended up issuing 120,000 cards to people to get them access to credit. We raised a total of $50 million into the company, ended up selling it to another credit card company 5 or 6 years later. And I got to sort of enjoy that, ultimately a win, and be able to take stock and figure out what I wanted to do next. So that's kind of fast forwarding a little bit about where that led.
Amazing. That story is so inspiring. And throughout that journey, Marla, one of the things is the chatter in our heads, as women, even without any of the externals, we have this chatter in our head that says, you're not good enough. It's just this imposter syndrome that keeps coming. Yeah. I can't imagine when there's an external force to add to it, that happens as well. How did you deal with that chatter in your head during those toughest times? Like, what made you get up and go back out? And what was that drive to win?
Great. I wish I could give you a clear articulation of what it is, right? Like, I have tried to come up with a way to express what it is. And I think for me, it just felt like this is my idea, right? This is my thing that I started, that I got a few people to quit perfectly normal jobs to come and join me and go do this. I'd gotten a bank lined up to issue this product. I'd gotten a servicer set up to be able to field inquiries from potential future customers. By the way, had also raised $2.5 million of investment capital from my friends, family, colleague, champions of mine that I'd accumulated over the course of my career. And I sort of had this sense that I got us into this mess, right? And I have to go down swinging, right? I cannot let this particular, what I would describe as bad actor, show up and not give this a chance, right? And never even have a chance to see if it's possible until there is literally nothing left, right? Until there's no more money, no more anything, no more team, no more nothing. And only then, right, when it's literally just game over, am I going to quit? Because I stood up, right, and said in front of all these people, let's go do this thing together. And I just could not see myself letting that down without following it all the way through to the true bitter end. And there is also a little bit of just wanting to prove that I can do this and I can win at this, right? And if I hadn't, right, I would have had to come up with another mantra for myself. But I really felt that I wanted to prove, you know what? I can do this too, right? I read about all these people raising all this money, doing all this stuff with all these companies. Why not me, right? And I really wanted to be in this arena. So that kind of got me through it, kept me going.
I love that. You drew on that inner strength and then why not me? I love that. You touched on this just briefly about 3 women being across on the investment side amongst the 100 or 200 investors you pitched in. I just want to dig a little bit on that. What was your experience like, pitching to women versus men, and how did it all come into play?
The pitching is the same, right? The conversations, feel a little bit different. There's sometimes different rapport. I think it's really just indicative, to my mind, of the fact that there is a very monolithic perspective on the other side of the table. There are just sets of experiences, perspectives, inclinations, right? Willingness to believe in change that varies from person to person based on lived experience. And when we set up structures in our society where only one particular demographic group or gender is making sets of decisions, I think it's easy to imagine that there's an entire set of lived experiences, belief in possibilities that is not reflected in those decisions. And so that means, in this case of capital allocation, entire categories, I can imagine, of businesses that don't get funded, that don't ever get to see the light of day, entire categories of founders don't get a chance at bat because the person across the table, you cannot relate, right? Or relates very differently on that basis. And that has become, for me, the most important way that I spend my time now, right? Is thinking about ensuring that at least there's the possibility, and just automatically inserting a woman or a person of color or an LGBTQ members of our society across the table doesn't necessarily in and of itself equate to change, but it introduces the possibility of another perspective, of a broader ability to relate to what it might be like, right? I'm thinking about the guys that I was pitching to who've never in their lives even thought about what it might mean to not have access to credit, right? These are people that have been relatively well off most of their lives. I was there pitching to them about a business that was just something that they were like, what is a payday loan, right? That is literally the question. And that's fair, right? There are plenty of people that don't necessarily know what a payday loan is, but the fact that I've identified it as a problem and am trying to convince them and educate them then means that the hurdle to get them to a potential investment is that much higher, right? That for me is why it matters who was across the table, and why it matters for me now to be changing who's across the table.
Makes sense. And that brings us nicely to your current role, the Skoll Foundation. Could you talk to us about some of the changes you've made, your experience there, and what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, no, happy to. And I'm really excited about what we're doing. As you started off talking about, right? Skoll sits on $1.8 billion in its endowment, and we make all kinds of decisions every day about who we employ as money managers to manage those dollars on our behalf. Those managers are the people that I was pitching to when I was at FS Card, right? So they are operating on the behalf of some asset owner. In some cases, foundations, it could be pension funds, it could be insurance companies, individual kind of family offices, wealthy individuals. But those actors, we're called the limited partners in the way this is structured, and they are very responsive to what their limited partners ask them to do. And so identifying a new class of investors, empowering new classes of investors to go out and make decisions on our behalf with how our capital is allocated, ensuring that our capital is allocated and invested in ways that are consistent with what we're doing on the program side, right? So Pratibha, we work on racial justice and climate change and effective governance and inclusive economies and pandemics and health systems. And we have the opportunity to apply that same lens with what we're doing on investing on the commercial side of the house, right? We talk a lot about what we do, from funding nonprofits and identifying change agents in all of these arenas. And we also make decisions every day about where, in our case, $1.8 billion is actually sitting and what it's actually doing. And so I am in a position now to be able to bring in new classes of assets, right? So one of the ones I'm really excited and proud about is an organization called APHIS and Heritage, right? A&H, we call them. And they are an asset manager. We have made an allocation out of our endowment to them. They go out and identify business owners that are looking to retire or sell or exit their business. Then they partner up with the employee stock ownership plan, the ESOP inside of that company, and enable the employees in partnership with their employee stock ownership plan and with A&H to buy that business. So now you've changed the face of what business ownership looks like. You've enabled an exit for an incumbent business owner, failure, and you've set up the possibility for much broader wealth sharing, upside potential, and participation for the local kind of workers that might be incumbent in that business. If this can take hold, and we can see more of this in other parts of society, it changes the concentration of wealth building opportunities, it changes ownership, it changes trajectory for workers, right? There's just humongous potential in this. And so it's led by two Black men who have been doing these kinds of deals off the side of their desk, but could never get the allocation to be able to do it at scale. And so bringing Skoll to the table to enable them to raise a fund and actually go out and demonstrate this is institutional, repeatable caliber of business has the potential to be game changing, right? So that is illustrative. We've done a few more already, but that is illustrative of the kind of change that comes when I participate in helping allocate our endowment inside of this foundation, alongside all of what we're doing on the program side as well.
Right. Amazing. That is actual true change that's being brought to the world right now and truly game changing. Marla, thank you so much. As we're rounding up, do you have any last words that you'd like to leave our audiences with and all the women around the world?
I guess the thing I would say is be willing to take some risk. Trust yourself that you are the asset, right? That you will be able to live through, overcome, live to fight another day, even in the face of significant failure, setback, that there is another bite at the apple, and why not you, right? In the same way that I thought, why not me? So I'll stop there. Thank you, Pratibha.
Thank you so much, Marla. Thank you so much for being with us today. And it's been an honor and very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.